Okay, so now let's talk about a variety of animal viruses. So, those that affect humans and other animals. Some of these you've probably heard of, maybe you've even had, and others might surprise you with how widespread and dangerous they are. So, let's start with measles, which is one of the most contagious diseases known to humans, and it's caused by the measles virus. So, it spreads through respiratory droplets that can linger in the air for hours. So, if you're in a room where an infected person has coughed or sneezed, you could be infected even 2 hours later. The fatality rate is about 1 in every 3,000 people in developed countries, but in less developed nations, due to malnutrition, poor healthcare access, and some other factors, fatalities can soar to 10 to 15%. So, thankfully, measles can be prevented with a vaccine, which is part of your MMR shot or your measles, mumps, and rubella shot. So next up is the herpes virus. This is going to include herpes simplex virus 1 or HSV1 and type 2 HSV2. So HSV1 causes those familiar cold sores or fever blisters that occur around the mouth. It's incredibly common. About 70 to 90% of adults worldwide are infected, often acquiring it in childhood through close contact like kissing or sharing utensils. It's usually harmless, but it can be annoying when it flares up. HSV2, on the other hand, is sexually transmitted, and it is the cause of genital herpes. So it's less widespread than HSV1, but still affects about 20 to 25% of the US adult population. Both viruses can become latent, so they hide in our nerve cells and then again reactivate during periods of stress, if you're sick, or if you have any sort of weakened immunity. So another member of the herpes virus family is Varicella zoster virus, or VZV, which causes chickenpox during initial infection. Once the chickenpox symptoms clear up, the virus doesn't leave. It actually stays dormant in the body. So years or even decades later, it can reawaken, and when it does, it comes back as shingles, which is really, really painful. You get a blistering rash that typically affects older adults and those with weakened immune systems. Again, now there's vaccines to prevent both chickenpox and shingles, so this was a big, big win. And we can't forget norovirus, often referred to as the stomach flu. So although it's not actually related to influenza. So norovirus is notorious for causing gastroenteritis, so it leads to symptoms like vomiting, diarrhea, and some stomach cramps. So it's the leading cause of foodborne illness outbreaks worldwide, and it spreads rapidly in places like cruise ships, schools, and nursing homes. It's highly contagious and resistant to many disinfectants, making it a really, really, really big public health concern. So when it comes to treating viral infections, we hit a wall that antibiotics just can't break. So antibiotics work only against bacteria, not viruses, which means that your typical viral cold, flu, or stomach bug won't respond to any antibiotic treatment. So in the past, treatment meant letting your immune system handle it, which it often does, but that isn't always enough for serious viral diseases. So thankfully, we have vaccines, and they have revolutionized our ability to prevent viral infections like measles, polio, hepatitis, and COVID-19. So vaccines really work by training your immune system by exposing it to a harmless version or a component of the virus so that it's ready to fight if the real deal ever does show up. So for viruses that are already inside the body, we have antiviral drugs that have been made that target specific parts of the viral life cycle. For example, some antiviral mimic nucleotides, so they trick the virus into incorporating them during replication, and then they halt the process. Others, like AZT for HIV, block enzymes that viruses rely on, like the reverse transcriptase that we talked about previously. So these treatments can't always eliminate the virus, but they can suppress replication and help manage chronic infections. Okay, so if you thought viruses were weird, now we can even talk about something a little bit stranger, and that's viroids and prions. So viroids are just naked strands of RNA. They don't even have a protein coat like viruses do. They're found mostly in plants and are responsible for a dozen crop diseases, including the infamous potato spindle tuber disease. So, despite their simplicity, viruses can hijack a plant cell's machinery and direct it to make more viroids. And then that's going to damage the crops in the process. So, prions, on the other hand, they aren't even nucleic acids, they're infectious proteins. So, a prion is a misfolded protein that somehow convinces other normal proteins in the brain to misfold as well. And this is going to create a chain reaction. It can lead to a neurodegenerative disease that are often fatal and untreatable. So the first recognized prion diseases were Kuru, and this was found in the 4 people of Papua New Guinea who practiced ritualistic cannibalism. So the disease spread through the consumption of infected brain tissue, and other diseases include mad cow disease, and the human equivalent, which is Creutzfeldt-Jacobs disease, or CJD. And these disorders result in brain damage, dementia, and then ultimately death. Okay, so let's move on to a very important and relevant topic, and that's emerging viruses. These are viruses that are either new to humans or are spreading rapidly in new geographic areas. So emerging viruses often jump from animals to humans, and sometimes from one species to another before infecting us. So factors that contribute to their emergence include global travel, urbanization, climate change, and the ability of viruses to mutate rapidly. So some well-known examples include avian influenza, or H5N1, swine flu, H1N1, Zika virus, and Middle East Respiratory Syndrome, or MERS, and of course SARS-CoV-2, the virus that's responsible for COVID-19. So these viruses can arise from humans when they come in contact with animal reservoirs, so like birds, pigs, bats, or camels, especially in areas where wildlife and human populations are intermingling. This is just showing you a list of emerging viruses or diseases. Okay, so let's take a deeper look at SARS-CoV-2, and this is again the virus that causes COVID-19. This virus belongs to a family of coronaviruses, which are single-stranded RNA viruses. So coronaviruses typically infect animals, including bats, camels, birds, and livestock, but sometimes they can cross the species barrier and infect humans. So SARS-CoV-2 has a larger genome than most RNA viruses and a really, really high mutation rate, which made it both highly adaptable and unpredictable. So the virus has an envelope. Let me see if I have... No. The virus has an envelope that's derived from the host cell membrane, and it's covered in spike-shaped glycoproteins that form a crown. So that's why it was named corona, which is Latin for crown. And these spike proteins bind to the ACE2 receptors on human cells, particularly those in the lungs. And that's going to facilitate viral entry. So the envelope can be broken down by soap or alcohol-based sanitizers, which is why hand washing has really become a critical part of pandemic prevention. Okay, historically, the first severe coronavirus outbreak was SARS-CoV in 2002, believed to have jumped from a civet cat to humans. And then came MERS-CoV in 2012, originating in bats and camels in the Middle East, with a startling fatality of 34.4%. But the most disruptive by far has been SARS-CoV-2, which emerged in Wuhan, China in late 2019, and then quickly spread globally. And it led to a pandemic that affected over 500 million people and caused more than 6 million deaths worldwide. So this shut down our economy, schools, and everyday life as we really know it.